welcome baseball fans. We are rebranding here, your baseball show on the LaracuenteLedgerNetwork. We are changing from the Pinstripe Plunge Report to the Baseball Banter Broadcast, and today we are going to go over and be discussing whether or not the National League should adopt the designated hitter rule. I'll list all the pros for this idea and give my thoughts on why the National League should add the DH.
Just to add a little something extra to the debate about the DH in the National League, we're going to have an Edgar Martinez Funko Pop giveaway. So stay tuned to the end to find out how you can win this Funko Pop.
All right, baseball fans, what's going on? My name is Jeremy Laracuente, and this is the re-debut of your baseball show here on the LaracuenteLedgerNetwork, and it is now known as the Baseball Banter Broadcast. That's right. And today's installment is one that I've wanted to do for a very long time. It's not a secret. If you're a fan of the LaracuenteLedgerNetwork, then you know that I'm a New York Yankee fan. And being a fan of the Yankees, I am very partial to the American League style of play. But I'm going to give you the facts and present my judgment on the matter of whether the designated hitter should be added to the National League. So let's begin with a little bit of history. The designated hitter rule was actually put into effect in the American League in 1973. And for those that may not know what the designated hitter rule is, and it's exactly what it sounds like. His job as the DH, the designated hitter, is to hit, solely to hit. That's the job of the DH. The designated hitter rule is currently only in effect in the American League ballparks and during the World Series when the teams are playing in the AL cities. Now, this brings me to my first pro in adding the designated hitter to the National League. Baseball has seen some of the game's greatest hitters be presented to us through this designated hitter position. We've seen players like David Ortiz, Frank Thomas, Jim Thome, Paul Molitor, Vladimir Guerrero, and of course the award is named after this man, Edgar Martinez. Now the second pro, and the reason I believe that the designated hitter should be added to the National League, is for player longevity. We've seen many of those same players' careers be extended simply because they're able to reduce some of the wear and tear on their body and be just a designated hitter, be someone that comes up to hit 3, 4, 5 times a game. And I believe that this has allowed some of those players that we mentioned earlier to add on to their Hall of Fame resumes. And we know that sometimes the voters can be a little bit fickle, and if they don't hit certain numerical milestones, they don't really give them the same kind of respect that they deserve. But this position allows for players to kind of get some of those little bit extra metrics. Now, the third reason that I believe the designated hitter rule should be added to the National League is that it's a sheer boost to the offense at this position. The main negative that I have about the National League style of play is that it's something that, and it's honestly something that fans who like that style of play use as well as one of their reasonings for it. But pitchers standing in the box and swinging, helping themselves, quote unquote, is part of the reason the National League style fans justify it. You know, they have to get in there. They have to try to do something to further their own cause. This reasoning to me, it's poor. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. When you think about a pitcher who hasn't been a dedicated hitter since probably high school, they really haven't swung a bat with any consistency in several years. And then you want them to step into the box against their counterparts, the greatest arms in the world. To me, that just doesn't make sense, and it really doesn't benefit the team nor the player himself. I believe that most pitchers would rather focus on the art of pitching because it is very intricate and it's very detailed oriented, and it's something you really have to devote your craft to. And the same way hitting is. And I just don't believe that there's really a lot of pitchers that can really justify having the pitcher bat. I think that when you look at baseball's pace of play initiative, this, whole mantra that Rob Manfred has spewed out for the last several years, having a pitcher hit which is almost an automatic out, doesn't actually provide any offensive pace of play value to the game itself. Now, the fourth reason that I want to add the designated hitter to the National League is that we can finally have the same rules for both leagues at all times. Interleague play was something of a rarity. At one point, it was just in the World Series. So you could have two separate leagues, two separate rules, because it kind of felt a little bit more separate. Now we have interleague play every single day of the week. And because of that, the blurring of the lines between the two leagues, there's no longer American League umpires and National League umpires. We have the same set of umps for both games. So why don't we have the same set of rules for both games? Now, I posed a question on Reddit about whether or not the National League should adopt the DH rule, and a user by the name of Mark17 Grace responded with an analogy that later a friend of mine, Chris Eaton, would tweak. And it's basically the idea of having a pitcher hit in the National League and the DH hitting in the American League is the equivalent of having the AFC and the NFL be able to use a place kicker, but the NFC would have to use their quarterback as their place kicker. Two different sets of rules being under the same global league, the Major League Baseball. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I think it's pretty clear that I am very much in favor of adding the DH to the National League. But beyond my personal preference, there's actually history on my side that we should have had the DH in both leagues since 1973. Bill Ripken would tell a story on MLB Network about the day that the National League owners were set to vote on whether or not to add the DH to the NL. So I'll play that clip for you right now.
Well, the discussion comes and goes over the years for various reasons. Bill Ripken has been among those championing very loudly the adopting of the DH in both leagues. You've done so for a long time, and almost counterintuitive to everything else you stand for, because you're an old school guy. You're saying it's time to let this go and put the DH in play in the NL.
But let's go back to 1972. I'm going to drop that on you right, because you weren't even born yet.
I was just born in.
Were you born in? 1972, the vote came to play, right? Ruly Carpenter, the owner of the Philadelphia Phillies, went deep sea fishing. This was before the advent of the cell phone. He was going to vote for the DH. Pittsburgh was going to vote with Philadelphia. You need a majority vote. Houston abstained. The vote ended up 5-4 against. If Ruly didn't go fishing, or we would have had a cell phone, since 1972, we would have had the DH. So all these so-called old school guys that were born that year, maybe, now you're sitting there looking, you would even never known what the National League was.
Simply put, the DH rule should have been in both the American and National Leagues since 1973, but that may not be enough evidence to convince you. So let me dive into a little bit of stats right here to plead my case further for the DH to the NL. So as I began researching for this piece and only really focused on designated hitters and pitchers hitting, obviously, it's an entirely unfair comparison, but anyone that believes that pitchers should continue hitting in the NL, that's exactly what you're saying, that pitchers batting is the equivalent of designated hitters. And to me, it's not an equal comparison because they aren't the same. Now, since 1973, when the DH was added, the American League has had an average OPS, which is on base plus slugging. OPS is essentially how well a batter does at reaching base and how well he does at hitting for average and power. And I used OPS because it doesn't have too many advanced statistical metrics that certain sections of baseball fans dislike using. These are basic numbers that I use to grade pitchers hitting and the DHs. Now, the approximate average OPS for Major League Baseball since 1973 is an average of 731. Now, in that same stretch of time, the average OPS for designated hitters is 805, which is an average of about 74 points difference. Now, would you care to guess what the average OPS for pitchers hitting during that same time span since 1973? Comment your guesses down below. Let me know, what do you think pitchers have hit for an OPS since 1973? A combined average of OPS since 1973. And the answer is approximately an average of 362. DHs are legitimate hitters. pitchers are not legitimate hitters. And the fact that the OPS is approximately 443 average points better for designated hitters and pitchers should be enough to convince you. But if not, let's dive in just one step deeper, shall we? I wanted to compare the best and worst DHs and the best and worst hitting pitchers since 1973. And let me tell you, the numbers actually turned out to be quite interesting. Let's start with the worst hitting pitchers. I continued using OPS just to kind of remain consistent with the metrics and making it easy to kind of keep everything in line. So for these metrics, I used a minimum of 250 plate appearances for pitchers and a minimum of 1,250 plate appearances for designated hitters to calculate the OPS. The bottom three hitting pitchers by OPS were Charlie Morton with an OPS of 175 and Ben Sheets and Bartolo Colon with an OPS of 193 each. These were the worst of the worst hitting pitchers. Now, the best of the best DHs in terms of OPS were David Ortiz at 955, Jim Thome at 927, and Nelson Cruz at 903. That's the worst of the worst in terms of pitchers and the best of the best in terms of designated hitters. So these next set of numbers are honestly the revealing ones. The worst hitting DHs by OPS in descending order were Evan Gattis at 724, Adam Dunn at 717, and Mark Trumbo at 695. Now, conversely, the best hitting pitchers since 1973 by OPS in ascending order. Carlos Zambrano was the third best at 656. Dontrelle Willis the second best at 661. And Mike Hampton, the best overall hitting pitcher since 1973, has an OPS of 695. The best hitting pitcher since 1973 in the DH era is the equivalent of the worst hitting DH during that same span. Most pitchers are not ever sniffing this prowess that Mike Hampton had at the plate. It's just not happening. And he would be the absolute worst DH on the face of the planet. Now, I know, inevitably somebody's going to say, what about Madison Bumgarner? He's a good hitting pitcher. And that statement's accurate.
To make the decision either.
High drive, left field.
He's the 10th best hitting pitcher in Major League Baseball history, according to OPS. But that would also be the equivalent of saying he's the 10th fastest slow guy in the race. Now, obviously, I feel that the designated hitter rule should have absolutely been added to the National League. But I want to hear from you, baseball fans. Do you think, with all this evidence that I've presented to you here today, that it's provided enough for you to support the case for the National League to adopt the designated hitter rule? Let me know down in the comment section below. If you're against the idea of the DH and the NL, let me know why. Let's discuss this further down in the comment section below. I want to say thank you once again for tuning in to this installment of the Baseball Banter Broadcast. And if you have suggestions for any other baseball case studies that you would like me to discuss, let me know them down in the comment section below, or you can email us at ledgernation@LaracuenteLedger.com using the subject line Baseball Banter Case Study. And if you've enjoyed this case study or like baseball or the LaracuenteLedger Ledger Network, and you haven't yet done so, consider hitting that subscribe button as well as that bell to stay notified of every time we drop new content here. We cover everything from baseball to music to movie reviews, TV show reviews, superheroes, comics, and even the XFL. So once again, thank you for tuning in. This has been the Baseball Banter Broadcast, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.
Thanks for sticking around. Now, the way that you're going to win this Funko Pop is, first, you got to be a subscriber. You got to hit that like button and leave a comment down below. And one lucky subscriber will win this Edgar Martinez Funko Pop giveaway. So, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.